All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me.
Well, I see Ryan Mauro is waiting at our waiting room. He's an investigative researcher with the Capital Research Center, which is an American investigative think tank. Hey, Ryan, thanks so much for coming on the Adult in the Room podcast. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Our last guest, I don't know where I happened to him, but I'm so pleased to be able to speak with you. Now, here's something I'm just going to ask right out of the chute. How many tentacles do you see between the Soros empire, the millions in the Soros empire, and street thugs in the Pacific Northwest, on the West Coast? Do you see any nexus there?
So the way it seems to work is that the money comes from Soros. And then, by the way, people donate to his foundation as well. So it's not just his money. He collects other people's money, and then they redistribute it to these nonprofit organizations in the United States and elsewhere. And then they do what they're going to do to build what I would call an ecosystem of hate. They don't necessarily have to, although in some cases they do, train and create the militants themselves. They just need to create the environment, the factory. And then they know that's what's going to result. So in terms of tentacles, that's kind of like the assembly line of how that happens. But I mean, there's obviously many organizations that are funded by Soros, not even including his buddies.
Oh, now you issued a 95-page report yesterday connecting the Soros organization to groups, not legit groups. These are groups that actually foment violence on the street. And you did that. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you, especially today, was that following the designation of Antifa as a domestic terrorism organization by President Trump, or at least his intent to do that, I went through your report and I found that there's some connective tissue between the Atlanta, Georgia Stop Cop City and jihadi groups and Hamas-friendly groups. So an international fund, if you will, connected to that organization. Now, some of the people from Rose City Antifa went down for Stop Cop City, as I recall. And in order to be able to roll up these guys as domestic terrorists, one must have some connective tissue to an international connection, something. And I'm just kind of wondering if that would be the connection we're looking for, to use as an excuse, if you will, to get these bastards for being domestic terrorists.
The way you're thinking is absolutely correct. And it's usually a concept that's too sophisticated for me to go into media because it's too hard to grasp. But here's kind of how it's working. The foreign governments and foreign organizations like Muslim Brotherhood and all of them, but also Russia, China, all of them, they stir up, think in terms of like a beehive and an ecosystem. So they sometimes directly support these groups, but they prefer not to. It's more effective to build the ecosystem. And what they've said, and they say this publicly all the time, is that the objective is to make Americans destroy each other and destroy America. So they don't care. So they support all the ideologies. It's like, to some extent, this far left, far right debate is a waste of time, because I'll tell you, when I monitor how these guys operate digitally, it's all in one box. And the rest of us, anyone who's well-meaning, Democrat, Republican, are on the other side. That's the framing. And so the foreign governments are doing everything that they can, foreign entities, to push the broader ecosystem and then fund some of these nonprofits. So that's the overseas connection. But the infrastructure, of what I call the seditionist movement in the United States. That's like the nonprofit network, the people believe those are the overt ones. And then they give money to other organizations that then get closer to the militants on the ground, who you want to be as independent as possible so you have plausible deniability. So that's the trickle down. It's like trickle down extremism.
You know, you start your report out, which is at capitalresearch.org, and you can find it. I've tweeted it out. Ryan has tweeted it out, and I'll do it again. And I shared it in my story on PJ Media today. And it starts out, since 2016, George Soros' Open Society Foundations, now run with his son Alexander, have poured over $80 million into groups tied to terrorism or extremist violence. Now, I pay attention to Antifa because I'm on the West Coast, and that's where we see 90% of the Antifa activity. And I will tell you that Antifa started becoming allies with BLM in late 2015, 2016. And that's when my friend, an independent reporter, got beaten up and then got prosecuted for pulling a gun in self-defense against Antifa at a BLM event. That's a couple of years before Andy No got beaten, although he'd been roughed up a few times by, guess who? Antifa. Would you look into that? I mean, I'd like to know if there is anything going on there. Since 2016, that's when this started, Ryan.
Yeah, so there are some great researchers. I think of one friend of mine in particular that like to trace it all the way back to the 60s, and you can. I mean,
sure,
there's
sure you can.
all the way, you know, so it's hard to say exactly when it began, but the escalation that you pointed out, that is correct timing. And so there's these inflection points where these groups started working together more and more and more. But what happened after October 7th was that they actually became one thing. So you can go to like an Islamist, like especially on the encrypted chats, you can go to an Islamist pro-Hamas one and you'll see Antifa there. Before it used to be like allies just here and there. It's merged now. This is one threat. And believe it or not, you'll see, and it cracks me up every time I see this, you'll see the white supremacists and QAnon types and those interacting with the Islamist extremists, and the propaganda literally being passed from, like, it'll go from an Islamist to the, you know, what they call the far right. I hate that term. And then you'll see it going back from them to the Islamists to the far left. And you see exactly how it's all just one thing. And it's astonishing. So, yeah, I mean, I'll look into certainly anything that you mentioned, but you're exactly right that what's happening is that, and it's probably partially because of the funders, the nonprofit organizations like Soros, they give money to all of these so-called social justice causes. And some of them are legitimate. And I'll explain why that's so important to understand strategically. So the ones that we're talking about, they give a lot of the money to these different groups, and therefore there's a common nexus, and therefore over time they morph and morph and morph until we get what we have now, which is the seditionist movement. But the legitimate ones, the reality is evil people still do good things. So I don't think it's like they can genuinely want to give to veterans, but also want to kill Christians. Like that's the type of people are. But strategically, let's say we shut down Soros. A minority of the money goes to extremists. It doesn't seem like all of it, or a majority. And so what's going to happen? You're going to see across newspapers across America pictures of people suffering because nonprofits that do legitimate charitable work and rely on his money got shut down. They don't have his money anymore. That's how they're going to fight this. And to be honest with you, as somebody with empathy, I do feel bad about that. I want to shut down Soros, but it does hurt me when I think about if we shut him down, there are legitimate causes that his money goes to, and those people are going to hurt.
Why doesn't he just give money to legitimate causes? Why doesn't he just give money to legitimate causes and not to the riffraff and the violent people? Is there?
Yeah, well, that's why I want to shut
question.
Him down. Yeah, that's why I want to obviously shut him down. But there are charities that do good work that they get money from some of these bad places, and then they hurt when you shut down those bad places. So politically, those are going to be the ones that fight back. It's not so much the groups you target. It's going to be the ones that depend on them and can say, look at how much suffering you cause. Couldn't you have just looked the other way?
Yeah, I see that going on in Gaza, actually. I don't know if that has anything to do with Soros money or anything, but
that's exactly right. Exactly.
Did you find any nexus there with your investigation? Tell me about that.
Yeah, let me see. I might even see if I have it right here. So It's like, well, there was at least 100,000 that went to Al Jazeera from Soros, so that was to work on documentary making. Because you want to make a documentary, who do you go to? Al Jazeera.
Sure, when you want the truth.
Right. They do good voiceovers, I'm sure. The one group that it looks like he gave $1.2 million to since 2016, the Al Mizan Center for Human Rights, that is based in Gaza and supports Hamas and has members directly linked to Hamas, and then Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, which is the Marxist counterpart to Hamas. They work in tandem. One is hyper-religious Islamist, the other one is Marxist. Both Iran backs both of them, by the way. So that just shows you the crossover here when you have the Islamic theocracy of Iran backs atheist communists as long as they work with Hamas.
Huh. That's it's mind-blowing. I mean, I've heard about this kind of thing. I mean, the nexus between the left and Islamists. I know it exists. Annie McCarthy wrote a book about it years ago. I recognize that's a thing. I just wonder how one goes about defeating them. And I guess that part of that is the transparency that you've brought in your study. What else can you tell us about what you found out?
Sure. Well, aside from the fact that it's over $80 million going to 54 groups based on Soros's own record, so like nobody can argue with this. What I found was of that over $80 million going to groups engaged in domestic terrorism, crime, and pro-terrorism advocacy, over 23 million of it went to at least 7 groups who are quite openly involved in domestic terrorism and crime on American soil. That's a linchpin. And so people say that this is going to be tough to defeat. I don't think it is. I think if we got everyone on the same page that knew some of the tricks that, honestly, that I've used in my own intelligence work in the past, that I've done, because I've reported thousands of extremists to law enforcement. So I've learned some angles. We could beat this very rapidly.
Really?
I did. Yes.
What terrorist activities have they been involved in? Can you tell us?
Sure. A lot of it is the rioting and things like that. So the money went to, like $400,000 since 2020 went to the Center for Third World Organizing, that brags about how they, and there's a quote, threw down with people in the streets during the uprising after George Floyd passed away in 2020, and it says we trained thousands, supported over 100 organizations in 2020, 2021, and taught them, quote, new tactics for actions during lockdown. There's no wiggle room here. The first logical step, I think the designating of Antifa as a terrorist group, I'm going to welcome any step. Let's do the easy stuff first, the most powerful stuff. Let's revoke their tax-exempt statuses. And if there's a elongated process to do that, which, when you read the IRS code, that shouldn't be, but if there's some legal thing that'll delay it, like some people say, change it, pass a law. In today's environment, that'll pass in 24 hours, because you can't have a situation where you can't have an elongated situation where you go to revoke a charity's tax-exempt status, and then it takes so long that they just register a new one in the meantime, and everything goes uninterrupted. You can't have that. But according to the IRS code, you cannot engage in or try to make happen any type of criminal activity. It's supposed to go away like that. And if we do that, according to what the extremists say themselves, I quote from Truth Out, which is a radical, you know them. So Antifa,
sure.
Connected Code Pink and all of them, they wrote this panicked article. I love it. I want to get the exact quote here. where they were talking specifically about my previous report where I broke apart the anti-Israel activism movement, and I found over 150 pro-terrorist groups manufacturing that whole thing. And here it is. They said it's an existential threat, and they go on to say that could easily mean a quick death, referring to most of the groups that are involved in nonprofit stuff. And then they say, of those that survive, if we start stripping away the status based on what we did, they will suffer mass chaos. So they told us, we figured it out.
Wow. And your solution is to deny them 501c4 or 501c3 access to free money from the feds. As
a first step, but honestly, if we just did that, the impact would be overnight so massive, It would be bad for them. But then I have a million other ideas, all of which are easy.
Like what else? Can you give us a couple more ideas?
So if you want to, you can use RICO especially on the militant and organizational level, but also the Treasury Department has sanctioned groups as transnational criminal organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So then you just have a group like Capital Research Center and researchers like myself, who very often the federal authorities, by the way, actually haven't done the stitching together. So use activists. I have researchers, civilians on Twitter, on X, send me great stuff all the time that I give to authorities, and they're like, yeah, we didn't know about this. Happens all the time. So we connect them to the foreign transnational criminal organizations that are sanctioned. You get them that way. Or you designate a foreign terrorist organization, and you do that through the State Department or the Treasury Department. You can sanction individuals or entities overseas for their terror connections. And there's many other ideas besides that. And I will also say this, even activism, this stuff, they're so blatantly bad that it's just a matter of getting a team of people that know the social media algorithms, people to research the donors, the advertisers. I'm confident that if we just had a critical mass of people to help distribute this stuff, to go to the donors to these groups, they would flee. Half of them don't know what they're funding. The other half are scared of the repercussions if they get found out.
Wow.
This is doable. It sounds big, but this is doable.
Wow. Good on you for exposing it, Ryan Mauro. Thank you so much. And I'll tweet it out and we'll excerpt this, and I really appreciate it. We're going to flip this for our Seattle Red show today as well. So thank you so much for everything that you've done. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow. That was amazing.